Hello, I'm Lloydetta Quaco. Welcome to Sharing Our Cultures. Today you'll get to learn about all the experiences of the early Chinese immigrants to Newfoundland. And Sharing Our Cultures will be right back. Welcome back to Sharing Our Cultures. Joining me in conversation is Gordon Jin, and he has spent a lot of time doing some advocacy work around the Newfoundland Chinese head tax. Welcome to Sharing Our Cultures, Gordon.
Thank you very much, Lloydetta.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to have you here.
Yes, I'm really happy as well.
Right, yes.
Thank you.
So can I start off by asking you what motivated you to get into this work and this project?
So it's a really odd question because all the years that I grew up to the time when my dad and mom passed away, or at least my dad anyway, I never heard about the Chinese head tax in Newfoundland. My parents never spoke about it. And as time went on, after his passing, I discovered with my mom some documents that talked about his payment that he had to pay. There was a certificate that was neatly folded in an envelope that indicated that he landed in St. John's, Newfoundland from a steamship in November 1931. And I subsequently, that was the start of a search for knowledge and information about what was this all about. And I realized what it was: immigrants to the Dominion Newfoundland during the period of 1906 to 1949 were taxed. And I since found out it's the only ethnic group that was taxed. Any other ethnicity or cultural group that came were never levied a tax of that nature. This kind of follows basically some of the things that were happening in Canada at the same time, because leading into the late 1800s, when Canada was completing the building of the CPR, thousands of Chinese laborers were brought into Canada to build a CPR. And they were coming in at no tax up to some point in time. But towards the end of the building of the CPR, when the railway was nearly finished, mostly built by Chinese laborers in the more dangerous jobs, the government of Canada, under lobby from the citizens of BC, basically felt the Chinese laborers are now taking jobs away from their citizens. So they were still coming over after the railway was completed. So in 1885, the government of Canada enacted a tax of $50 per person of Chinese descent who would come over. And that went on for years, and in the early 1900s, they were still coming over, paying $50 per person. So the government of Canada increased the tax to $100 per person. That only made it more determined, I guess, from their point of view, that there was a better life here. They could work, make wages, send the monies home to China. The conditions in China were not very good, so many were coming over to build a better life for themselves and their families by sending monies home. By the early 1903, when they still kept coming, the third increase came, or the second increase of $500, so 10 times what they originally paid. But they still kept coming. And until 1923, the government of Canada abolished the head tax in Canada and enacted what is now known as the 1923 Chinese Exclusion Act, that lasted for a period of 24 years, that banned Chinese immigration into Canada totally. So if you were of Chinese descent, you could not step foot in Canada. What made it worse was people that had already come to Canada under the head tax and were residing in Canada were targeted. Basically, the police, the RCMP, registered every Chinese immigrant in this country, such that even though they were already in Canada, they were not provided Canadian citizenship, but they had to be identified. And if you were found without documents, you could potentially be deported. So it was a very dark period in Canada's history. Now, having said that, the head tax in Newfoundland was from 1906 to 49. So realistically, we were in a zone where Chinese immigrants could still come into Canada under police guard once they land in Vancouver or San Francisco, and basically by train under constant police guard made it to Newfoundland. So it was probably the only location in Canada where Chinese immigrants could still come. Recorded history shows upwards to 400 landed in Newfoundland that paid the head tax. Meanwhile, in Canada, they taxed 82,000 Chinese immigrants. So
why do you feel that it was only the Chinese immigrants that were targeted and no other ethnic or immigrant group?
I don't know. I think the Chinese were a very hard-working group of people. They came to make a better life for themselves. They were willing to pay the monies to come here, and my dad paid the equivalent of $300, which I've been told was about 2 to 3 years' wages in Newfoundland at the time. I think they just wanted to start a better life, make monies to send home to their families so they could improve their standards of living in China, because there was a lot of people starving, civil war and strife, that sort of thing happening in their homeland. Yeah.
And so these were primarily men who came, so the women and the wives and children were left behind.
Right, right. I mean, there was not a law banning Chinese women to come to Newfoundland, but if my mom had come, that was an extra $300 for her to be able to even come here, which I think was very unrealistic at the time. I don't know of any Chinese women that came under the Chinese head tax that was imposed in the Dominion, Newfoundland. When I grew up in the late 50s, early 60s, I met many of the, I guess, my dad's friends, long time childhood friends that were still alive. And of course, at this point, they're all deceased now, but I remember going into many of the Chinese hand laundries that were still in existence leading up to probably the mid-60s. It was an era of, I guess, hard work for these individuals that started their own businesses, and eventually that evolved into retail, snack bars, restaurants, that sort of thing. But the age of automation and laundries and laundromats put the Chinese hand laundries really out of business.
Yeah, because I know when they came and they were looking for work, those who didn't find work created work for themselves.
Exactly, and hand laundries didn't require a lot of education. It's just long hours. You could buy the utensils or whatever equipment you need. Basically, not a lot of education required to wash clothes, right, and dry clothes. And it was a lucrative business. And in fact, in 1895, the first 2 Chinese men that have been recorded to land in St. John's started the first Chinese hand laundry in downtown St. John's, the site of the current City Hall Annex building, but it's also the site of our Chinese head tax monument that we unveiled many years ago.
Okay. Yes, and I was going to talk to you about that monument and the circumstances surrounding putting that together.
Sure. So on June 22nd, 2006, Prime Minister Stephen Harper stood up in Parliament and apologized to the Chinese Canadian people, including the Chinese Newfoundland people or citizens that were taxed under the different head taxes of its day, and basically made an apology for the racist acts, the unjust treatment of the Chinese people in this country. From that, within the next couple of years, the government of Canada actually issued, well, first of all, for living descendants, meaning not descendants, the living head taxpayers that were alive at the time, or their spouses, if they can prove that they were taxed with a formal document of some sort, they were entitled to a one-time $20,000 payment, non-taxable, which occurred. I don't know how many received that payment, but if your mom and dad, like in my case, were deceased at the time, you were entitled to nothing. I mean, when the original MP, I think in Vancouver, lobbied the government of Canada in the early 80s for redress, meaning the Chinese people were owed this. There were 4,000 surviving head taxpayers in Canada. And I think at the time of the head tax apology in 2006, I understand that might have been less than 400, maybe even 200. There were more head tax spouses alive than there were head taxpayers. In Newfoundland at the time, my understanding was there were 4 surviving head taxpayers. All 4 were not in very good health, and obviously they've since passed away, and that was 14 years ago now. So, yeah, but this project came about as a result of the government of Canada really wanted something positive out of this apology as well. And what they did was, through the Department of Canadian Heritage, they basically funded a community historical recognition program available to any group. We had to be incorporated, but any group in Canada willing to piece together a proposal to educate the public about measures related to wartime restrictions, immigration, racism, tolerance, anything that happened, like the head tax. So I guess I felt, and maybe some of my colleagues, head tax descendants and our friends and supporters felt, it's an opportunity here to do something to carry on the legacy of what my dad and his colleagues did by coming over to the Dominion. I mean, there's very little mention of it in our history books. Many of my friends don't even know today, 14 years later, that there's a head tax monument in downtown St. John's, or if there was a head tax at all that was imposed. So what happened was we had to be incorporated, so we drew up a constitution, elected a board of directors, got a lawyer, an honorary lawyer on board, and basically worked with the City of St. John's, the former city manager, Ron Penny, and the Grand Concourse Authority. Those 2 groups were partners with our organization. We incorporated as basically Newfoundland Labrador Head Tax Redress Organization, for lack of a better word, and basically pieced together a fairly detailed proposal with the backing of the Johnson Family Foundation, Grand Concourse Authority, which are partners, and the City of St. John's, for a 4-pronged project. And this 4-pronged project was, the biggest part of it was the monument in downtown St. John's, a living legacy to the trailblazers that came to the Dominion Newfoundland. There was this Chinese educational resource kit, of which you got a bit of a copy of, but there's other documentation as well. There was a display at the Memorial University Library Center for Newfoundland Studies about the Chinese immigration experience. And there was a website. So those were the 4 pieces of the pie that we've wanted funding for. And little did we know, a year and a half later, after the proposal was submitted, we got everything we asked for, funding-wise. So I was involved with this as chair of the organization that lobbied the Department of Canadian Heritage for the funding. And on September the 17th, 2010, we unveiled the monument in downtown St. John's with much fanfare. We invited all the provincial politicians within the St. John's area and the City Council. It was a gorgeous afternoon, well attended. And he wasn't a head tax descendant, he was an immigrant to the province, and he said, if your parents were alive today, they would be extremely proud of what you have accomplished for them.
I'm going to just hold that for a moment, and we'll be right back, and we'll continue from where you left off. Yeah? Okay. So Sharing Our Cultures will be right back.
Your opinion matters, and we want to hear from you. Get in touch with us using our viewer feedback line, your direct connection to shaping the shows you love. It's easy. Just grab your phone, scan the QR code on your screen, and take our quick survey. Share your thoughts, and let's make your viewing experience even better.
Welcome back to Sharing Our Cultures, and we're continuing our conversation around the monument that was created in a legacy for those who experienced and their descendants the Newfoundland Chinese head tax. So you were at the point in telling us that someone remarked that your parents would have been really proud on that day when it was unveiled.
Yeah. I guess I didn't expect that, but it made it more, I don't know what I was looking for word-wise, but it convinced me it was the right thing to do. And since that time, I've been advocating for, education outreach about what happened in the Dominion, Newfoundland in the early part of the last century. Much of it is not in the history books. There's some mention of it, but until you sit down with someone over a coffee or at a session like last Wednesday night when the CEO of the museum and the curator talked about the Chinese Exclusion Act, it really hit home about what was to be Chinese, to live in Canada in the early part of the last century. So it's not so nice.
No.
So, yeah.
And that needs to be told, and
Yes.
that's history that should be in the history
Yep.
books in all schools,
Mhm.
and because the monuments are also a reminder
Right.
that this happened, this was part of our history.
Yep.
And the sad part about that is that some of that is still happening. Like the monument was vandalized and was
Yeah.
racism,
Yeah.
really, against the Chinese community.
Yeah, it was over a series of many occasions, but the monument really is now on city-owned property. My understanding is that the vandalism has occurred. I don't normally get to see it, but I've been advised of it, and then I call one of our city councilors or the deputy mayor, and they're pretty quick to respond. I mean, it is on their property. It is a visible thing in downtown St. John's. It's unfortunate, but there is things that happen, and it could happen anywhere. And it is bordering on George Street, so there is that influence. But again, the city have been quite expedient in having it cleaned up or repairs done. So I'm very happy that the partnership with the City of St. John's is still continuing to this day. And they've been very supportive of this project from day one.
Which is very good,
Yeah.
because they're usually just small pockets of people who do a lot of these
Exactly.
racist activities, and it's good to know that the rest of the population really supports the Chinese community
Right.
here. And there's so many contributions that have been made from the Chinese community. You mentioned the laundromats,
Yes.
you mentioned the snack shops and the restaurants.
Yeah.
But even in other areas like engineering, you are an engineer.
Yes, I'm an
And
engineer.
you came here and you've lived here and contributed to the university?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. It's funny. My parents, I'm married to a pharmacist, but prior to this, many, many years ago when I was still in high school, my mom and dad wanted me to do pharmacy because it was a 9-to-5 job type, fairly clean, fairly safe. And anyways, years later, I married a pharmacist. But I guess engineering was one of those pragmatic professions where I thought, I love math and sciences. I just didn't know what I wanted to do when I started university, and many of my high school classmates were going into engineering, and here we are today. I think it's an honorable profession. I think if my parents knew where I was going to be today, now they passed away in 95 and 98, so it was probably 13 of 16 years after I graduated, but now I'm 40 plus years out from graduation, close to retirement, but I'm still, advocating for, what they did to ensure that I could be here today, to ensure that the physicians you go see in the various medical clinics and hospitals are here today, the great Chinese and Asian food that's in the St. John's mosaic today. So, I mean, a lot of things have evolved because of things that my father and his friends of that day did. In fact, one of his best friends, and I knew him very well, was the grandfather of the current author of Hollow Bamboo, William Ping. He was revered in the community. His grandfather, William Ping, the original William Ping, I mean, still remember him coming to our house every now and then, and I mean, he was just like, I don't know, just so nice a gentleman, very respected. My dad, I think he came in May of 1931, trained as a scholar. My dad came in November, so they remained friends for the duration of the time they were alive. So, yeah.
Well, it's great that so much has been able to be accomplished.
Yep.
And so, when did the Chinese Association for Newfoundland and Labrador started? Because I know you had the one for the redress.
Yeah.
Did that become that?
Yeah, that was earlier on. There were many clan associations in the time I grew up in St. John's, and 2 or 3 in particular. There was the Owl Clan Association, and their building is still on Bates Hill, I think is where one of the restaurants, I don't remember the name now, very iconic building, and it's the only clan association building where the Chinese gathered, I think on a Sundays to play mahjong. I never knew that, but I found out later in life that's where my dad would disappear on a Sunday afternoon. I mean, it was a form of recreation for him and his colleagues, because they worked long hours, sometimes 7 days a week. There was another clan association building, the Hang Heng Society, which was somewhere where many of the bars are located on George Street now, but that building has since been demolished. So you will find these clan associations in every major Chinatown in this country and in North America and around the world. This is how men of a particular surname would gather to, have activities, share food, that sort of thing. And you still see it today. Yeah.
So what would you like to pass on to the next generation? What would you like to say to them? How would you like them to uphold all this work that you've done and to see it move forward?
So I think of William Ping III, the current author of Hollow Bamboo. He's written a book about the experiences of his grandfather. If I can see the generation behind me do similar, and not necessarily write a book, but carry the torch for the advocacy work that I've done or others have done, I think I would rest in peace. I mean, I think history needs to remember that things went on in the Dominion, Newfoundland in the early part of the last century and in Canada that was not too nice. It happened, but it shouldn't be repeated. And forgetting about incidents of that sort leads to things coming up again. So I think events like what you have invited me to share with your audience, the event at the Rooms last week talking about the Chinese Exclusion Act, are examples of what we need to do. And it's very easy. It's just a discussion. And I share this knowledge with my friends over coffee or things, and I love it. Yeah.
And it is great. And so, as you're saying, like the William Ping III written a book, but some of the other young people could be part of the now Chinese Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. They can have a month or a year when they can just highlight some of those historical events.
I think I'm thankful that I'm here. I'm the only one of the kids, and I consider the 5 kids as my older sister, who's now in Ottawa with her husband, and my 3 cousins who are the kids of my aunt and uncle, and they're all away as well. They're in Ontario or Alberta. I'm the only one left here, and basically it's what's happened in Newfoundland over the last, I don't know, half century or more, because basically what's happened when they're educated, can't find work, they leave. And the same thing happened with my sister and my cousins. They got educated, couldn't find work here, so they left. Many don't come back. Yeah.
We're going to have to change that.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you stayed. And we're so grateful for all the work that you've done. Educating us, educating the next generation, because that's why it's really important. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming in today and sharing it with us. Okay. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And Sharing Our Cultures will be right back. Thanks to Gordon Jin for sharing about his advocacy work, and thanks to you for watching. Join us again next time on Sharing Our Cultures.